point, a build moves beyond a restoration or mildly modified and becomes a restomod. Limits on modifications vanish. To serve these classic truck podcasts, I combed the 2026 Hot August Nights event, traveling between Reno, Sparks, and Virginia City, Nevada. My focus was two-wheel drive and 4x4 classic trucks. I expected to find scores of numbers-matching pristine stone stock restorations. Instead, I quickly discovered rows and rows of vintage cars and trucks that had morphed into street rods and restomods. For a performance-motivated restomod build, the underhood approach was consistently a higher output V8 swap. Engines range from traditional iron Chevy small blocks to the latest LS engines and even Gen 5 LT powertrains. At the Big Boys Toys vendor booths, I met with the Blueprint Engines folks and discussed their range of crate engine and transmission offerings. I talked with the folks at the Heights Suspension booth and Coker Tire as well. There will be podcast interviews ahead. I'm scheduling them, sharing details on engine and transmission options, modern suspension upgrades, and classic tires. Chevrolet was also present with its high-performance crate engine and transmission packages. The classic car and truck scene is hotter than ever. There were 325 vendor booths devoted to classic car, truck, and restomod products. A mini SEMA show. 6,000 1979 and older vehicles registered for the 2026 40th anniversary Hot August Nights celebration at the Reno area. Some builders strive for a pristine restoration that will drive up the truck's collectible value. Other builders want milder changes for improving drivability and safety without altering the truck's original profile. Beyond this are the mildly to wildly modified and customized restomod builds. All 1947 to 55 First Series trucks feature traditional beam front axles with kingpin steering knuckles. Advanced design and new design half-ton trucks kept the torque tube rear axle with one exception, the 1955 First Series Chevrolet 3100. The 1955 Chevrolet First Series half-ton trucks came with the first open rear drive shaft Hotchkiss-style rear axle in a half-ton GM truck. 1955 First Series GMC half-ton models kept the old-school torque tube rear axle with an enclosed drive shaft. On a restomod, the torque tube rear axle gets replaced, most often with a later model GM axle. GM 10 or 12-bolt hypoid axles are always a good choice for advanced design or new design trucks. The larger 12-bolt axle handles much higher horsepower. Disc brakes are a practical option when the restomod truck's power-to-weight ratio is like a muscle car. This can be either front disc with drum rear or both front and rear disc upgrades. The right OEM components or a popular aftermarket brake kit will work here. A safer, dual master cylinder with custom tubing mounts either on the firewall with retrofit swinging pedals or neatly beneath the floorboard to preserve the original through the floorboard pedals. I have how-to videos at the 4WD Mechanics Magazine channel on brake hardware, specialty tools, plumbing layouts, and how to fabricate a safe hydraulic system. There are numerous safety concerns around brake system upgrades. I'm glad to share information here. The driveline will be open, as the truck is now a Hotchkiss rear drive system with leaf springs or a Lincoln coil suspension retrofit. Lincoln coil rear suspension is an option for all-out builds with extensive chassis modifications. Front suspension can undergo refurbishing or an upgrade, ranging from simply restoring the original leaf springs and kingpin beam axle to drop axle that lower the truck, or retrofitting an independent A-arm front suspension conversion with coilovers. Steering upgrades range from a straightforward Saginaw 800 or 808 rotary valve integral power gear conversion to fitting the rack and pinion steering from a C4 Corvette or full-size passenger car donor. When picking the right steering system, be aware of the advanced design pickup's curb weight and the weight at the front axle and wheels. Stock 1947 to First Series 55 trucks weigh in the 3,300 to 3,400 pound range. This is a few hundred pounds more than comparable Ford F-trucks of that era, due largely to the stamina built into the GM chassis and sheet metal. Saginaw rotary valve integral power steering gears are distinguished by their piston size, mounting position, and input spline size and count. I can expand on this if you need more details. Earlier, readily available steering gear applications are the 800 for lighter-duty half-ton trucks, while the 808 served heavier-duty 3/4-ton and 1-ton trucks. There are also later gears with piston sizing based upon the truck's GVW rating. Depending on your advanced design or new design project aims, the truck's estimated curb weight, the gear's mounting position, and the desired steering ratio, there's a Saginaw retrofit gear and pitman arm that will work. Contemporary independent front suspension retrofits often involve rack and pinion steering. Be certain that the steering rack and IFS spring rates can handle the vehicle's front axle weight and curb weight. Light pickup truck weight bias is always toward the front, especially with a larger V8 engine swap. Keep in mind that each new level of modifications requires metal fabrication and high-quality welding. If you can do skilled welding, great. If not, be clear what subletting this work involves and the cost. The chassis, steering geometry, and rear axle center line must align correctly. The front wheel geometry has to track with the rear. Years ago, as a powertrain and chassis tech at a GMC truck Pontiac dealership, I ran the Hunter electronic beam four-wheel alignment rack. From that experience in frame-off magazine and book project builds, I know bare frame and axle checks that work well for squaring a chassis and suspension components. I share details like this at the podcast. There are numerous safety and fabrication concerns when upgrading the brakes, steering system, rear axle, and chassis. For engine and transmission mounting, proper alignment and support makes the truck drivable and eliminates vibration. Driveline angles at the U-joints are critical. Unlike an advanced design or new design truck, modern light truck powertrains involve 3-point engine and transmission mounting, with side perch engine mounts and a transmission crossmember mount at the rear. From 1947 to First Series 1955, GM light trucks feature a bell housing with perches for side mounts and a crossmember beneath the bell housing. The transmission hangs from the bell housing. Many powertrain conversions use a 3-point mounting system with a crossmember beneath the transmission and 2 later style side mounts on the engine. I used an iron 1960-62 V8 bell housing on an FJ40 Land Cruiser project to mount the clutch release arm at the passenger side with a hydraulic slave cylinder. This is the only iron bell housing in the 235 inline 6 era that has a hydraulic slave mount. It enabled installing a Chevy 383-stroker small block V8 into the FJ40 while keeping Toyota's hydraulic clutch master cylinder and stock swinging pedals. If you want hydraulic clutch linkage and an iron bell housing with side mounts, keep this somewhat rare bell housing in mind. Chevrolet and GMC used hydraulic clutch linkage from 1960 to 62 on inline 6, V6, and V8 engines.
Beginning in the mid-1980s,
later model GM trucks and cars all have hydraulic clutch linkage. For a later engine or transmission conversion into a 1947 to 55 First Series pickup, there is a 1960 to 62 iron bell housing for the 235 inline 6 and a different bell housing for Chevy V8 engines. The 235 housing will also bolt to either a 216 or dip and splash oiling 235 inline 6. Be aware that 1960 to 62 GMC V6 bell housings are unique and will not fit any Chevrolet 6 or V8. For later model engine and transmission swaps with factory hydraulic clutch linkage, there are original equipment and aftermarket pedal assemblies and brake clutch master cylinders available. When mounting swinging pedals and cylinders at the firewall, make certain that the firewall is reinforced to handle the force of brake and clutch pedals. Consider a power brake booster to reduce pedal pressure. Powertrain options are wide open for Restomods or even mild builds if the conversion leaves the truck appearing close to stock. As a rule, small block V8s work well, and big blocks are not ruled out for an advanced design or new design truck. The bigger the engine, however, the more fabrication work. Big block engines are feasible, and aluminum cylinder heads can shave off considerable weight. Due to the engine bay layout, a steering gear upgrade with an aftermarket steering shaft and retrofit steering column is part of any V8 swap. For decades, I have turned to advanced adapters for steering gear, engine, and transmission mounting products. Universal engine mounts and a transmission adapter or bell housing can be a place to start. Restomod builds with V8 engines always involve exhaust system issues. A mild small block V8 build can involve stock manifolds, tubular headers, or common aftermarket headers that fit. A big block engine gets more complicated. The exhaust system needs to clear the frame, the cross members, and possibly an added X member in the frame when retrofitting an independent front and rear suspension system. This needs to be thought out. I cover issues like this at the podcasts. Aftermarket suspension kits generally require fabrication work and welding. Be aware that IRS and IFS suspension systems can get costly. Installation involves critical frame modifications and metal fabrication work. Maybe you want to retrofit C4 Corvette front suspension, rack and pinion steering, and independent rear suspension with the drive axle and half shafts. A quality installation kit, the donor parts from a recycled Corvette, plus the sublet labor costs for this installation can run $15,000 to $20,000. The truck's entire body has been removed, like during a frame-off restoration. The original ladder frame is stripped for the fabrication work and welding. Beyond this, extreme builds can take it to the next level by installing a complete aftermarket chassis or building a custom frame from scratch. Some builders take a different route altogether and place the advanced design or new design body on a late model two-wheel drive or four-wheel drive drivable chassis, sometimes including the donor truck's powertrain. This can be cost-effective if done correctly. Drivable chassis swaps can still involve considerable welding and fabrication. Ideally, the donor vehicle will have a close frame length, frame width, and body mount points that will work with the classic truck's wheelbase, track width, and cab mount layout. The early S&T truck long bed pickup with a regular cab is within a 1-inch wheelbase match to a 1947 to 55 First Series pickup. Other donor vehicles come close and can also reduce fabrication work. The aim with a drivable chassis swap is finding a near match for wheelbase, the body mounting points, plus frame and body space for your chosen powertrain. Even for a mild engine swap project, the engine and transmission alignment and leveling are critical to avoid driveline issues. These podcasts cover concerns like this and more. A Restomod build is a substantial undertaking, even with kit parts and somewhat bolt-on solutions. I've been here many times with magazine and book project builds and share ways I get this done. Safety is always a priority. Performance expectations and your budget need to align. Any quote-unquote project quickly develops a life and timeline of its own. During the 24 years that I handled Q&A columns, how-to tech, and project builds for off-road, popular hot rodding, Chevy truck, and other magazines, I supported car, truck, and SUV builders at every budget level. All of my projects were on tight deadlines. I learned to be realistic about the effort and time involved in restoring, rebuilding, and modifying vehicles. If you want to keep a Restomod build or a restoration project within your budget, the podcasts share how to calculate the project scope, labor sublet costs, and parts pricing. The last thing you want is to part out or sell an unfinished truck. Unfortunately, this often results from running out of money or losing interest in a long, drawn-out project. At the Hot August Night swap meet, there were hundreds of popular and often expensive, unused aftermarket parts, selling in their original boxes. The vendors had picked these parts up from builders who abandoned their projects. Let's see that doesn't happen with your build. Automatic transmissions are popular and often practical for a Restomod. Based on my experience with rebuilding rugged band-type vintage hydromatics, and despite knowing their strengths, the iron dual-range hydromatic would not be my choice for a Restomod. I would opt for a Turbo 350 or Turbo 400 if 3 speeds and a torque converter seem enough. If overdrive is the plan, a later 1987 to 89 700R4 transmission core build with a speedometer cable drive, or even a newer 1990 to 92 700R4 or 4L60 non-electronic unit would work well. The 1990 up versions need a vehicle speed sensor and a suitable aftermarket speedometer which could alter the original dash instrumentation. If you want to keep the original instrument cluster and gauge appearance, that could be an issue. There is also the 4L60E, the electronic version of the 700R4. This unit requires an aftermarket electronic module and wiring harness. If you want or need more stamina, the 4L80E is a Turbo 400's overdrive successor. The 4L80E is the heavy-duty 4-speed automatic used in 3/4-ton trucks. Of course, there are bulletproof and hefty Allison options, though their use is most likely in a 4x4 with a Duramax diesel or big block gas engine conversion. If your Restomod budget is large enough for a late LS or LT engine, there are the more exotic 6, 8, and even 10-speed automatic transmissions in newer cars and trucks. Unless coupled to a late engine as a package, these latest generation transmissions could be overkill for a Restomod build. The best approach is a crate powertrain complete with retrofit wiring harnesses and an electronic control module. Otherwise, these late transmissions require sorting out the entire powertrain control system and wiring. Fundamental, mechanically or hydraulically regulated 3- and 4-speed automatic transmissions have been the common route for a custom truck or Restomod build. There are aftermarket wiring harnesses, throttle valve controls, and modules available for aluminum-cased hydramatics and other GM transmissions. These kits can bridge the gap when installing an electronically controlled transmission or a later LS engine. A one-off approach for a powered-up Restomod intended for highway driving is a gear vendor's overdrive behind a traditional 3-speed automatic like the rugged Turbo 400. This provides both overdrive and split shifting between each gear if desired. The gear vendor's unit is often found in high-performance cars that drag race on weekends or in a light truck that hauls a hefty load. The good news is that an automatic transmission solution can be met on any budget. For a Restomod, the same applies to the manual transmission options, ranging from traditional passenger car, Corvette, and muscle car 4-speed transmissions to 5-speed and 6-speed contemporary overdrive gearboxes. I saw several original muscle car T10 Warner 4-speeds at the swap meet and new gearbox solutions like Richmond and Tremec at the Big Boys Toys displays. My friends at Center Force Clutch were there as well. The choice between a manual gearbox or an automatic transmission is your personal call. When building a Restomod pickup with a high-performance V8 swap, a contemporary transmission, a rear axle retrofit, plus major chassis and suspension changes, any 1947 to 55 First Series Chevrolet or GMC truck will work well. Choose your favorite body profile and trim preferences. There are subtle changes over these model years. Deciding between an advanced design or new design truck comes down to the body profile, visualizing where you want to go with the build or restoration, and what value you want to retain. Styling or customizing the body and paintwork or interior details is your personal signature on the truck. The artful, distinctive tastes of owners was on full display at Hot August Nights. While a stone stock advanced design or new design truck restoration remains a solid investment, a Restomod's value is based strictly on the quality of the build, the components involved, the finished vehicle's look, and how a buyer might perceive the truck. For a Restomod, the caliber of the mechanical work, the quality of the welding and fabrication, the powertrain selection and installation requirements, chassis choices, how the truck handles, the truck's aesthetic appeal, interior changes, the paint finish, and any body modifications. All of this is personal choice that also determines the truck's ultimate worth or resale value. This is the beginning of a journey. Let's see where your project leads.